July 1st, 2026 was supposed to be a quiet date on the royal calendar, the kind marked privately and passed over publicly. It was the day Princess Diana would have turned 65. Kensington Palace had no ceremony planned, no official portrait, no formal statement. But by the evening, the day belonged to someone nobody had scripted for it at all. Princess Charlotte, 11 years old, did something so small and so unguarded that the people around her could not stop talking about it. And when the details reached the public, they landed with a weight nobody expected from a child. This is not a story about a palace tribute. It is a story about a granddaughter who never met the woman she was named for, and what happened when she was finally given the chance to know her. Here is what happened. This is not just a sweet family moment tucked away from the cameras. It touches something the monarchy has struggled with for nearly 30 years, who gets to decide how Diana is remembered, and when that memory stops being managed and starts being felt. For most of Charlotte's life, Diana has existed to her as a name, a portrait, a story told carefully by adults. What happened on this birthday changed that, and it changed it in a way the palace did not orchestrate and could not have predicted. To understand why this moment struck so many people so hard, it helps to start with the small tribute that came weeks earlier, the pearl bracelet Charlotte quietly wore in an echo of her grandmother, then move to the birthday itself and the private request she reportedly made that nobody in the household saw coming, before sitting with the moment that followed it, the one that is said to have left even the adults in the room fighting back tears. And finally, what it means that Diana's story is now being carried not by statements and biographies, but by an 11-year-old learning it for the first time. Let's get into it. Diana, Princess of Wales, was born on July 1st, 1961, at Park House in Norfolk, and died on August 31st, 1997, at 36 years old. Charlotte was never going to meet her. She was born in 2015, 18 years after the crash that ended Diana's life, and for most of her childhood, her grandmother has existed only through photographs, family stories, and the occasional heirloom passed down with careful explanation. One of those heirlooms became newsworthy just weeks before this birthday. At Trooping the Colour on June 13th, Charlotte was seen wearing a 3-strand pearl bracelet, strikingly similar to one Diana wore throughout the late 1980s, a Nigel Milne design created in 1988 for the Birthright charity. The original now belongs to Catherine, Princess of Wales, who wore the authentic piece that same day, while Charlotte wore a matching version beside her, an unmistakable, deliberate echo between mother and daughter. Royal watchers noticed immediately. Fashion writers called it a quiet tribute. Few realized at the time how much more was coming. Charlotte's resemblance to her grandmother has become something royal commentators discuss with increasing frequency. Ingrid Seward, editor of Majesty magazine, has noted that Charlotte carries not just Diana's name, but flashes of her mother's warmth, the same direct eye contact, the same ease with strangers that made Diana so beloved. According to a report in Hello magazine, Catherine has made a deliberate effort in recent years to keep Diana present in her children's daily lives, not as a solemn historical figure, but as a person they are allowed to ask about freely. That effort matters because Diana was not simply royal by title. She walked through an active minefield in Angola to force the world to look at what landmines actually did to people. She held the hand of a man dying of AIDS in an era defined by fear and stigma. She insisted her sons see homelessness up close rather than read about it from a distance. Charlotte inherited none of that firsthand. She is inheriting it second-hand, in fragments, at an age when she is finally old enough to ask real questions and expect real answers. That is the context Charlotte's 65th birthday landed in. A child standing at the edge of a legacy she is only beginning to understand, on the one day of the year built entirely around the woman she never got to meet. It also arrived just over 8 weeks after Charlotte turned 11 herself, marked with a new portrait taken by royal photographer Matt Porteous and released by Kensington Palace on May 2nd. Royal biographer Duncan Larkham has observed that Charlotte is now old enough to be told the fuller version of Diana's story, not the sanitized one reserved for very young children, but the real one, including the parts that are difficult. That shift, from protecting a child from a story to finally trusting her with it, is not something the palace announces. It happens quietly, inside a family, long before anyone outside notices. According to sources close to the household, what happened on July 1st unfolded in 3 parts, each smaller than the last, and each somehow heavier. The first concerns the bracelet. Sources say Charlotte specifically asked to wear it again that day, not for an event, not for photographs, but for what one insider described to a royal publication as an ordinary Wednesday at home. There was no engagement scheduled, no reason for the piece to leave its box. She wanted it anyway. Whether or not the request was granted has not been confirmed, but those familiar with the family describe it as the first sign that this birthday meant something different to Charlotte than birthdays before it. It was not just a jewelry choice, it was a child deciding, on her own, how she wanted to spend the day. But the bracelet was not the only thing that happened. The second detail is quieter still. According to a source cited by a royal outlet, Charlotte reportedly asked Catherine to tell her something about Diana that she had never heard before. Not a headlined fact, not a line from a biography, but something small and specific. Catherine is said to have obliged, describing an ordinary afternoon from her own memory of family stories, the kind of detail that never makes it into an official record. One royal insider called it the moment Diana stopped being a name on a page and became, for Charlotte, something closer to a person. A separate source close to the household said Catherine had been waiting for Charlotte to ask that question herself, rather than offering it before she was ready. And then comes the third part, the one that is said to have reached furthest. According to reports, when Charlotte was told the full story of the flowers Diana used to press between the pages of her books, a small private habit few people knew about, Charlotte reportedly asked if she could try it herself, using flowers from the garden that afternoon. A source close to the family described the room going quiet, and more than one adult present is said to have been visibly moved. Not because of what was said, because of who was asking and why. One insider who spoke to a British tabloid said it was the closest anyone in that house had come to feeling like Diana was actually there. To understand why this lands so differently than a palace tribute, picture the alternative. For nearly 3 decades, Diana's memory has largely been managed from above. Curated statements, approved photographs, official anniversaries handled with careful institutional distance. Diana herself resisted that kind of distance her entire public life. She wanted, in her own words, to be a queen of people's hearts, not a portrait behind glass. On July 1st, none of that management was present. There was no institution deciding how the day would be marked. There was a girl asking her mother a question, and a mother choosing honesty over a rehearsed answer. Catherine has spoken before, if only in passing, about wanting her children to know Diana as a real person rather than a symbol. And this was that intention finally made visible, not through a statement, but through a single afternoon. Nobody planned for cameras. There is real tenderness in that image, a child reaching for a grandmother she never had, using nothing more than a bracelet and a flower and a question. It is easy to forget, watching the polished version of this family, that grief in a royal household is still just grief. The same shape it takes anywhere else, only carried by people the world insists on watching. William, too, has spoken in the past about wanting his children to know Diana as a person rather than a headline, describing small moments at home where her name comes up naturally, unprompted, folded into ordinary conversation rather than treated as an occasion. What happened on July the 1st looks like the clearest evidence yet that this approach has taken root. Not because a parent announced it, but because a child acted on it entirely on her own terms. What this means going forward is larger than one afternoon. For years, Diana's legacy has belonged to institutions, biographers, and a public that never stopped asking questions about her. That is slowly shifting. It now belongs, in part, to a child who is only beginning to understand what she was given when she was given that name. Diana never reached 65. She never saw the granddaughter who now presses flowers the way she once did, wears her jewelry without being asked, and asks questions no biography can answer. Somewhere in that quiet, unscripted afternoon, a woman gone for nearly 30 years became, for one 11-year-old, real.